Welcome back, everybody, to Buzz City Breakdown. I'm Owen. That's Albert. We write for the Charlotte Hornets on SI website. It's the middle of August, but we're still talking Hornets Tuesday through Thursday, Saturday and Sunday, 5 days a week right now. Probably going back to 6 when the season starts. We're going to be doing some mailbag questions today. I put out some on Twitter. Got a lot more questions in a much shorter time span than I anticipated, but we needed that, so appreciate you guys for asking. I think we have one question from YouTube, and the rest of them are from Twitter.
Correct.
At Owen Watterson with the 0. So thank you guys for going there. I've been trying to do that before mailbag episodes, and we'll probably keep doing it weekly. So pay attention to the Twitter. Albert doesn't have one, or I'd plug it. You can like and subscribe to the YouTube channel all the time, anytime for free. It helps us keep doing this the way we do at the consistency we do right now, and we plan to keep doing it that way for a long time, frankly. Albert and I don't have any plans on switching this up, so you're stuck with us for a while. So thank you guys for the support. With that said, I think the last thing to tell you is find us on Spotify by looking us up at Buzz City Breakdown, not at, just Buzz City Breakdown on Spotify. Don't have any other audio-only options yet besides YouTube. You can go to our at Charlotte Hornets on SI channel page on YouTube, go to the playlist section, and Albert's got a podcast playlist on there that you can use if you have YouTube Premium. You can also call us at the Buzz City Breakdown line, 704-750-9063, anytime to leave your thoughts via voice, and you'll get them on the show. With our little jingle that I use my own guitar for. As corny as it was, I thought it was better than using some made-up, artificial garbage, just to say that. So with that said, all the house cleaning out the way, I'm excited for this mailbag. We have some good questions, Albert. How you doing, bud?
Doing great. I'm happy that we were able to leave yesterday's episode behind us and all of the the disputes in that one. Still not quite over, some of the stuff you said in there, but we'll have to deal with that another day. I'm happy to get into the mailbag today, and that's why it's good that we have the mailbag on Wednesday as like a regular show. So no matter what happens around Wednesday, on Tuesday, on Thursday, on Wednesday, we can be nice to each other, and we can we can find some common ground.
Be viewer first, right?
Yes.
No, I'm completely with you. So with that said, let's just hop into it, guys. Make sure you can leave your questions below for next week's mailbag. We go back on the YouTube comments from sometimes further back than a week, because at a point we weren't doing them every single week. They've done well, so it's just become a weekly thing. So leave your comments in the YouTube channel below on any video that we do throughout the week, and they will inevitably be considered for a mailbag if you'd rather do it than Twitter. So let's jump into Regulator 8680, who is another common commenter, as I like to say. We appreciate you coming back. Another little slide question here. I like his in-depth questions. I think it gives Albert and I a lot of runway to be verbose in the way that both of us like to be about the game of basketball, and more importantly, the Charlotte Hornets. So from Regulator, his set him to the question, I should say, is the Hornets were in the bottom 5 in clutch time performances last season, finishing with a record of 10-18. If they had finished with an average record, 14-14, they would have had 48 wins and finished 5th in the East. So then Regulator goes into his question. Regulator says, can the Hornets finish at 500 or better in clutch time games next season? If yes, how do they achieve this? Which player will be the most important, and how does this affect their regular season win totals? Many thanks. This is an awesome question because we haven't hit on this, and I actually have a lot of thoughts on this. And I'll start, and I won't belabor on LaMelo certainly for too long, but that's kind of where my train of thought starts here, because I thought about this during the regular season, honestly quite often, because especially early in the season, I don't know why it sticks in my head so much. Maybe because they got beat by Philly in a clutch game down the stretch. I think it was in Charlotte, game that people thought they could win. I don't think Joel played in that game. But regardless, early in the season, I want to say it was game 4. Maybe it was either 3, 4, or 5. It was one of the first 5 games of the year. They were in Philadelphia, and I remember so vividly. LaMelo went to the left corner. It was right in front of the Joe Mazzulla, in that right in front of the coach's box on the wing. Took a step back 3 and just I don't know that he airballed, but it was a pretty bad miss in a close game in absolute crunch time. And I remember at that point, after that game early in the season, I had to have a conversation with myself and tell myself, this is not going to be the season. They're not going to win a playoff series this season, because this is the season where they had to do exactly what they did last year, get to the play-in, learn how to win close games, and then that's when you take those bottom 5 in clutch games of a season to get to better in clutch time in the future. And I'll say this before I toss it to you, Albert. They were people talk about, and we talk about, taking lumps in the playoffs. Like teams have to do it before they win. I think it's just the same in clutch games. I think, if anything, the reason Charlotte was, what did we say? The fact that we're talking about they were bottom 5 in clutch time, they played in 28 clutch, like crunch time games. In terms of the statistic, I think it's final 2 or 3 minutes games within like 5 points. I don't know the exact definition of which different websites are different, but that's like the basis of the crunch time metric. 28 games is a ton to be in close games down the stretch, like a ridiculous amount for a team that was in the play-in. And while they don't have LaMelo, I think that kind of changes maybe the leap they could have taken this season in terms of winning more close games. I think they won't completely go 180 and be one of the better crunch time teams this year. I think they're going to have another season where Brandon as the best player and Khan as a, more often ball handler and Kobe as the lead point guard. Like, they're going to have to take another season of lumps in a sense, but less than last year. I expect them to be much better in crunch time games this year. I think it will really impact their win total at the end of the year. I think the reason I think they can get to 38 to 44 wins on the high side, like we did in our record prediction episode less than a week ago, and go check that out, is because I think they're going to win more of these games next season, regardless of not having LaMelo Ball. I just think having LaMelo back, because of the chemistry and the lumps they took together last year, LaMelo specifically, learning how to win, and lose in crunch time games, what not to do, he would have gotten better. And the team would have taken a bigger leap because of him, I think, in general. But, like, Khan's going to be better in close games. He missed some shots down the stretches of close games and losses. Same with Brandon. Brandon also hit. A lot of those games they won in crunch time was because of Brandon Miller. So I think he's got that gene a little bit in him, and I hope to see him really jump there. I didn't expect to, waterlog that long at the end of the day, but this is a great question, and I think they will jump here. But what is your initial reaction to this question that regulator posed, Albert?
Well, I think getting rid of LaMelo might actually help it. And you can have an argument about that because, of course, he was kind of the driving force of that offense. And if you look at the roster now, they certainly could use another ball handler, but they have enough guys probably to force opponents to respect them. And if you have Naz Reid and Conconable and Brandon Miller out there and Kobe White and maybe even Dennis Schroeder, none of those guys are elite creators or initiators. None of those guys are elite at attacking the rim, elite at creating their own shots, but they all can do it to some extent. And doing that by committee might be better or more dangerous than giving LaMelo the ball in crunch time and saying, well, do something for us. And with LaMelo, quite frankly, he also just was erratic at times. I think that's one of the reasons he got traded, no? Because he would take shots, he would make decisions that weren't the right decisions in those moments. He frequently chucked up threes that sometimes went in, but that also, when they didn't go in, looked pretty bad. And so there has to be a middle ground definitely to be found in, like, does losing LaMelo hurt? Sure. But also you can get better even without him. And I think if we look at, you say last season they went through a lot of lumps and, well, they could have been better this year with more chemistry and this and that. LaMelo has been, or was here for, 6 years? He was here with Miles for all of that. He was here for quite a while with Terry Rozier. He was here for quite a while with, someone like Gordon Hayward. And you would expect him to be a better clutch time player at this point. I think it's a bit, I don't want to say ridiculous, that's too much, but I think it's a bit far-fetched to say this season he would have figured it out in the clutch time. This season he would have become a more regulated player. And again, the highs when he played fantastic and when he, made great decisions, when the shots were falling for him, the highs were incredible, like some of the best any player around the NBA has had in recent years. But the lows were just as low. So I couldn't have seen him figure it out this season. I think that would have kind of just been a bet and a losing one probably. So I'm positive they'll be better, but there will be for sure at least 5 clutch time games where they just don't find anyone who has a hot hand or who can step up in that moment. And that was never really the case when you had LaMelo. When you have LaMelo, you can give him the ball and you can say, just go for it, do your thing. And now it's gonna have to be: do we go to Kobe? Do we go to Brand Miller? Do we go to Con Knipple? Do we go to Nas Reed? I mean, do we go to, if he is in the game for some reason, Harness, maybe in the latter half of the season, if he's played well, he'll be in the game to close.
Sure.
There's more options, and that's generally a positive. Although again, there will be games where that doesn't look very pretty when you give the ball to Kobe and he misses a driving layup, and then you give the ball to Brandon and he misses a mid-range jumper. But again, I think overall it's a positive.
I hear your argument on LaMelo, because you're right. He was an incredibly erratic crunch time player, and I think that's why I mentioned that part of it is because last year was easily the best team LaMelo Ball has ever had around him. And, fair of you to say, like, it's kind of far-fetched to think he would have just made this insane jump in the crunch time. But I think with the team that, especially with Kobe backing him up, had that been the case, again, conjecture, I think he would have gotten better. And, we'll see whether that rings true with a better team in Minnesota, although he's got to readapt. But I totally hear you, at the least, on this team getting better. I think they will get better too, but I think the part we just disagree with, I think at the end there you were like, having these options, is generally a good thing. I think it will be in the long run. I don't know that it will be this year, maybe later in the year, but I think it will probably negatively affect more crunch time games than it helps, just because they got to figure it out. It's an adjustment for Charles Lee too. He's still figuring out how to coach, and he's going from, like you said, give LaMelo the ball, to figuring out who's got to get it now.
Definitely it is. But then again, from an opponent's perspective, it's harder to scheme against or prepare for a team that has multiple guys out there who can score. And they still are probably going to close with Musa most of the time. So he's someone who obviously doesn't pose any danger as a scorer. He poses a danger on the offensive glass. So you have to put someone on him, but not someone who you expect to score. But apart from that, you can put 4 guys out there who can all put the ball on the floor and do something with it. Can they do it consistently at a high level? No, but they can do it regularly enough at a high level that you can't sell out on anybody. You cannot double away from really anyone on this team. It would be, I'm curious to see if any team's going to try that, to, let's say, help off of, I don't know, Nas. You're not going to help off of Nas. You're not going to help off of Kobe. Definitely not off of Con or Brandon. And that's, at the end, if it comes down to those crunch time possessions, you're really just trying to make the opponent think about all of the possibilities that you can go to. And you obviously want to create as many possibilities in the opponent's head as to what you're able to do in this moment. So that the opponent, if you have LaMelo Ball out there, you have, let's say, maybe 5 realistic pathways. Teams also have obviously their stuff that they go to in crunch time. And then the opponent knows that now you have 4 guys out there, and again, they're going to have their stuff that they go to regularly in crunch time, and later on this season, teams will have adjusted to that. But with those 4 guys out there, you don't even know who's getting the ball, never mind what kind of play is going to be run. So I think it's going to be a positive, because that mind game is not exactly the right word, but just making the opponent think, making the opponent's coaching staff think, who do we have to prepare for in this moment. That's incredibly valuable, in my opinion.
I think so too. Don't disagree with you. I think it'll just be interesting to see how not just, Brandon adapts to likely being the first option. And I think Charles Lee will use it to his advantage or in early clutch time games. Like, I think they might get off to a really good start at the beginning because, like you said, teams are probably just going to assume it's going to Brandon, and maybe Kobe takes advantage of that. Kobe's an incredibly clutch player, too. I want to give him credit. Like, it's not just a shot against Miami. He's been great in the play-in for Chicago. Like, he has shown him.
Yes, very true. Also, you said something about Con. You didn't say he wasn't clutch, but you said he missed some shots. He also hit some really clutch shots.
Yes.
He hit that corner three against Toronto, which I remember
hit
just
the
off the
layup
top
at
of
the
my
end
head.
of the Dallas game against the Cooper Flag,
Yes.
Explosion. 49 points, I think it was.
He hit a huge three against Atlanta late in a game that I think they ended up losing, but for a rookie, you're gonna make some, you're gonna miss some, but I think we also look at all of these four guys that I just mentioned, Nas, Brandon, Con, and Kobe, and all of them are willing to take those kind of shots and they're able to make them. And could Con be a bit more efficient in those situations? Sure, but that's the first step is always being willing to take them, and then you can talk about making them later on.
Certainly, and Khan's willing to take them is much less erratic and much more traditional than LaMelo's.
Sure.
And I think Brandon Miller too. I think that's why he more so often when he got the ball and clutched him. Like I think immediately to the Spurs game at Spectrum Center, the noon game they played and won there in the orange jerseys. He was just incredible, and they had a little bit of a lull in the middle, but was just incredible fourth quarter. Musa was great on Wemby. But great question, Regulator. Overall, we think they'll be better, but understand that there will be more lumps to come. They'll just look different than last year's lumps, more traditional lumps that they can grow from and not have to base off of LaMelo's play style alone.
Yeah.
Like I think that's the benefit, is it'll be a much more team-based approach to clutch time, and in the end, that will benefit them. It just will take some time.
Sure.
In the end. Let's go to the second question from Titus Andronicus on Twitter, at Titus Sheen, I think it is, Sheyn. So thank you for your comment. Again, had a lot of Twitter mentions. He said he loved the show. We love you. Thank you.
We do also. His name isn't Titus Sheen. There's only one S in there, so it would be Titus Sheen.
Titus Sheen. Yeah, I'm really bad with these names. These when there's no spaces, it just get lost. All right. Titus's question, he says, Charlotte now has depth plus young players on a good trajectory and timeline, but you need a top 10 player to truly contend. And we have the assets to make it happen. What player/archetype would be the most complementary to the current team, and who could Jeff realistically angle for? Great question. I told him this. We've, if you want to go back and look through our channel, it's maybe been closer to a month now than a couple of weeks, but we did an episode talking about what was our future potential targets,
Yes.
soft, medium,
Well,
really stretch.
We did an episode where we each brought 3 future trade targets and big names, and I think we interpreted it very differently. So I don't want to spoil it. If you want to go and watch it back, I'll try to put a little info card up here.
Albert shot for the moon. I kept it very realistic.
I mean, mine weren't absolutely impossible.
Yeah, that's probably.
But
yeah.
I definitely was going for some. I was punching up a bit, let's say.
Yeah,
and
you were trying to make Sion a point guard. Essentially, you were really shooting for the stars, reaching for the moon.
Would never do that. But you were much more, let's say, reasonable in that sense. But you can go back and watch that for sure. There's some trade targets and there's some ideas. But I think the most interesting part of this question is what kind of archetype do they need? Because
that's what
in the end, you can always talk about this player might become available, and there are available superstars at this moment. Not saying that he's super available, but Stephen Curry, probably you can get him next year, I would assume, if he, still wants to play at that point. You can for sure get someone like Zion, or, well, not those aren't superstars, but you can get good players, right? From the Pelicans, pretty much everyone. You look at the Rockets. Could you get a superstar of the Rockets if they maybe fail this year? Could you get Kevin Durant or Alperen Şengün possibly? There's always going to be superstars that are ready to move on from their team, but the question is really, are you willing to just go for the first guy that pops up? Or do you search for a middle ground and you wait for 1 or 2 years and then you take who's available? Or do you say, we're just gonna ride it out and we're gonna wait until we find the guy who we think fits perfectly
I
into
think,
this team?
you know, this isn't the player I planned to bring up first to this question, but I'm just sitting here thinking about it as you're talking. I want to give a different side to what I was initially going to say, because I think in terms of realism, he was talking about like what could Jeff realistically do. You made a great point, and I want to play off what you said about are they going to take the first guy that comes available? And I think given what we've seen from Jeff Peterson, the answer on that clearly has to be no.
Yes,
I
obviously.
mean, we talked months ago, maybe not on the show quite yet, but I definitely talked to a bunch of people off camera about Charlotte was always one of the under the radar teams in the Giannis sweepstakes,
Yes.
just out of the sheer amount of assets they could have offered, more than the Heat gave them. They were just more enamored with the fact that they got better players than Charlotte could have given them, but Charlotte could
Yeah.
have given them more draft capital. With that said, I say that to say he could have jumped at that. He could have went all in. Because there was a world where you give up enough, Brooklyn Nets type of draft capital to get him with LaMelo, with Brandon, maybe even,
Yeah.
and Khan still. Like truly, I think that's aside the point. It's over, but excuse me. He's not going to jump at the first guy, and to bring that into the first player, I want to talk about again. Not the guy I anticipated. I have another name here. This is going to sound like it doesn't make any sense at first, but again, we're thinking probably 4 or 5 years down the line, like 3, 4 at the very least, with this pick,
I think
with
5
this
is
name only.
a bit
Aggressive.
much.
That's the very end of the spectrum. I think 3 to 4 years is probably more ideal. Like let Khan grow. At that point, he'll be on the first year of his deal. Brandon will be coming off, or on the last year of an extension. Maybe it's a value extension and he's a superstar, so you like that money. You're extending Khan, and now you want to cash in your assets to add a third big star. Just like this person's saying, I think 3 years is a real realistic timeline for that, including this season. This season being year one of those 3. Scotty Barnes. If it really blows up in Toronto in their face, Kawhi maybe injures himself, or something gets reopened in this case. Like Albert said, ESPN came out and said that that report wasn't official about Kawhi. So like
The NBA
if
came out and
ESPN,
said that. ESPN
which
reported it, and yeah.
which if it was even close to being true, I think the results of the case just would have come out after that report. Like it just would
Yeah.
have been, all right, well, it came out, let's just go with the rest of it. The fact that it wasn't tells me that there's, probably more to come. And we'll see what that means in terms of Kawhi Leonard. I'm very interested to see that at the very least, but I think there's a world where in 3, 4 years' time, they got to move on from Kawhi and pivot, and some of these young pieces they get priced out of, similar to OKC right now, and they have to pivot to the next situation if it doesn't work out. If he becomes a superstar, they make a deep playoff run, they're not going to move off of him. But if it really blows up in their face, like a lot of people don't think will happen, I think it's realistic that happens.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think we've talked about this before on the show. It's probably been a while, but you've brought up Scotty Barnes before and mentioned that you think it's a possibility he becomes available. I just don't see it. I think the Raptors, they don't have an elite young core built around him, but they have enough guys to even where, let's say, Kawhi either isn't traded there or he injures himself and retires next summer. That's not likely but possible.
Uh,
Even
Go ahead.
even if that happens, they do have RJ Barrett, they do have Emmanuel Quickly, they do have Jamal Shed, who I think is very solid. They do have Colin Murray Boyle, so I think it's going to be really, really good for a long time in this league. So you're looking at a team that can still regroup afterwards. You still have Jakob Polto, for what it's worth, not that good at this point, but that team has a solid foundation to even where, let's say, even if the quiet trade doesn't go through, they have Brandon Ingram. They would still have Grady Dick, who wasn't good last season for them, but you still have those guys. I think there's just not really a world where Scotty Barnes becomes available anytime soon now. If we're talking about, let's say, in 4 years' time, that time frame that you set up, that obviously is a possibility because in 4 years' time, who knows what's. I mean, that far into the
Oh well,
future, anything could
well,
happen.
well. I want to bring up a name that I think you're going to have much better agreement with, and not to spoil too much of the episode, we teased that, but Jason Tatum was the name I wanted to bring up. I think is probably one of the most realistic. Like we're talking about superstar names. I just made his case for MVP yesterday, and we won't dive back into that. But regardless, Albert did say he's a top 5 player in the league, and I would tend to agree with that. At his very best, he's capable of being that. With the ties to Charles Lee, if it really goes south in Boston this year, and he's just not the same player, not the guy that I think he can be off this ACL, and they really blow it up, like I think there's a real world where Charlotte gets in on Jason Tatum and buys a little bit low in the sense that Boston's moving off, but they think he's still got a lot of decent years left in him. I think Tatum would fit this roster really well. I think you'd have to play the 4, and you'd be having a little bit smaller of a lineup, certainly, with Kobe. This would be a couple years down the line. It wouldn't look exactly the same, but point guard, Brandon, Kahn, and then Tatum. The fact that you have Brandon and Kahn is why you'd be worried, but one of those guys is probably going if you're trading for Tatum. I'm gonna be real honest. I don't know how else they get Tatum without trading one of those guys unless he really tanks this season. You know what I'm saying?
Well, you mentioned that he's gonna be the MVP. He's, in your opinion, like a major MVP candidate. So I can't really. I would tend to agree, but from your perspective, maybe it doesn't make as much sense.
That's very fair. Let's go ahead and go on to the next question here.
Well, I just to get one more final thought on there, because I think we mentioned archetypes, and I do want to say something about what I think, what kind of archetype they should go for in a star player, or that A1 kind of player. And this isn't a really controversial take, or even a necessarily, this is nothing that I'm coming up with and nobody else has said before, but they need someone who can get to the rim and finish at a high level. And Brandon can't do either of those things right now. Con doesn't project to be someone who can do either of those things on a high volume. Kobe is a very solid driver, I think. Maybe even a bit underrated, but he isn't, uh, that type of upper echelon first or second tier driver and finisher in the league. He's a very respectable one, but just not that good. Not the strongest guy, not the best finisher, even though again he's a fairly solid one. So you mentioned Giannis Antetokounmpo. He would have fit in that sense. Also,
Sure.
he is older. Has been injury prone in recent years, so there's a lot of negatives to that one, and I completely understand not going for him. But in the sense of getting someone who can get to the rim, finish efficiently, and then ideally, you don't want someone who is gonna drag the defense down. It's probably gonna have to be someone who's at least, solid defensively, because you don't have strong defensive personnel on this team anyways. And you'd also like someone who can do a little bit of something else offensively, who will find his teammates for open passes. But if I would have to draw up a player, I'd have to say it would be someone whose strength it is to get to the rim, be really dangerous in transition as a rim runner, and finish very well. And also he should be able to self-create his drives, right? Musa is a solid rim runner, but of course you're not giving him the ball and expecting him to make his way to the lane that way. So they
Yeah.
need that driving ability, and that player, that dream player, also just has to hold up defensively, be a fairly solid playmaker. I'm just really describing Giannis Antetokounmpo, but again, there were a lot of reasons as to why they didn't go for him, and those were fair reasons.
I'll mention one more name too. Two, I guess, really, because the situation would call for both of them being traded most likely. But if things go south in Orlando this year, new coach, maybe they decide to pivot. Like if it goes real bad, and Paulo, he was. It says 67%, rim field goal percentage, but that's 49th percentile for, playing the kind of range of position he does. They have him listed as a power forward, so I don't quite think that percentile represents his position group entirely, but still not like a cream of the crop terms of rim finisher. I do think it's an interesting name to monitor because the Magic are no, elite team, and the East is really good. And we're going to see some teams in the next year and a half, 2 years, really just like pivot back to the bottom and wait out these new lottery rules, expansion, etc. And maybe the Magic will end up being one of those teams. I think Charlotte could easily feast off of the scraps of them blowing up their roster, and like Paolo's good enough that they could still believe in him. I just think that's probably on the lower end of the spectrum of like guys they could go for. It doesn't really fit superstar criteria too, certainly.
Yeah, well, if you're talking about Orlando, of course, the guy you should be talking about, honestly, is Franz Wagner.
I meant to mention Franz because of the German connection. Yeah, that's why I said two guys from
Not
Orlando at the beginning. Yeah.
Not only do you have the German connection, but he is also someone who has shown flashes at, creating his own drive to the rim. Certainly not at a Giannis Antetokounmpo level, but at a level where he would be the best guy at putting pressure on the rim on this team offensively. And again, holds up defensively, gives you rebounding, gives you a pretty solid feel for the game, I think, especially offensively. So he would fit those general criteria I just mentioned for me. Ideally, you want him to just kind of blossom a bit more, especially the jump shot can get more consistent. It's kind of gotten worse over the last couple of years in Orlando. But then again, who has become a better jump shooter in Orlando over recent years? Pretty much no one, I think. So,
well, I'll also add too, real quick, just looking at Paolo's stats while I haven't pulled up, and we'll move on. That he was, in terms of rim attempts, like he 5.8 attempts at the rim per game. That was 99th percentile for Paolo Banchero. So certainly he tries to get there, which is more than Brandon Miller. Certainly, like Brandon Miller's not getting that many attempts up per game at the rim. As a matter of fact, Brandon Miller, in terms of rim attempts per game, Brandon was at 2.4 rim attempts per game for reference, which is 56th percentile. So Paolo could certainly give this team some things it needs if he gets a little bit better. But then at the same time, if he gets a little bit better, the Magic probably aren't trading him. And more efficient, Magic probably aren't trading him. So we'll see what happens there. Great question overall. Archetype ultimately, I think that I'd say they need a guy that when crap hits the fan and you can't get a shot and everybody else is cold and Khan's not making threes, and you can toss it to him, and whether it's mid-range, the same way we see SGA do. Like, people crap on him, but the ability to get to the free throw line when all else fails, the ability to hit a mid-range jump shot when all else fails, and get to the rim when all else fails. Like, that's who Charlotte needs. That's why I mentioned Tatum. He's the type of guy that could do that. Paolo projects to be the type of guy that could potentially do that. There's a lot of interesting names, but I think the bigger part of your question is it's not going to happen in the next year. Probably not 2. I think 3 or 4 years is when we're looking at Charlotte making a move like this.
I'd say 2 to 3.
Any more thoughts?
Yeah,
2 to 3?
I'd say 2 to 3. Also because you have to keep Brandon and Korn especially happy. And if Brandon in 2 years' time has developed into an all-star, we don't think he's going to develop into one of the best players in the league. But if he's let's say a 2-time all-star in 2 years' time, then he's going to want to compete, and he's going to want to at least have a shot at making a run to the Eastern Conference Finals. And for that, you would need someone of the caliber that we just talked about.
Let's go to the next question. Can't say your name on the show. I won't. He left a lot of questions under the Twitter ask that I had to put questions for the mailbag, so I appreciate you. We'll get to some of those questions next week for sure on the mailbag, so keep up, but just couldn't put. I think he asked me like 9 questions. I appreciate all the thoughts, man, in the middle of August, so we'll get to some of those next week for sure, Mr. Swinging. You know who you are. Swinging says, what is the realistic timeline in your opinion for the Hornets to become a playoff level team, and how much longer, with all the right hypothetical scenarios, until they can become a contender? I thought we would make the playoffs this season. In best case, 3rd in the Eastern Conference. Now 4th is the best case, I think is what he's saying, and 6 to 7 IMO. So there's a lot of ways you could go with this. I think the safe answer is to kind of bounce off of what we said just in the last question, that nothing's going to happen in the next year, maybe 2, but that's earliest, like Albert's saying, and I think only 2 if Brandon takes a jump and Khan shows he can be an on-ball creator and like continues to develop, avoids the sophomore slump.
Yeah.
If Khan shows you that he's more than that he's closer to Klay Thompson than just one of the best than JJ Redick. You know what I mean? Like they're gonna really bet on him alongside Brandon. Uh, I think I think it's probably like 4 to 5 years, um, and because even if they make a trade at year 2, 3, it's going to take at least a year, in my opinion. Like even when these superstar teams get together, it takes a year most times for them to really get it right, even if they have a great regular season in the playoffs. I mean, so I think the earliest would be 4 years, and that's if everything goes right with Brandon. You get him on a good contract this offseason. Everything goes right with Khan because that's about the time you're going to have to re-sign Khan to his rookie scale contract, whatever that ends up looking like. And so that has to be in consideration because we're talking about, just last question, adding somebody else that puts them in this contention range. The draft is certainly still a possibility. They're really going to have to hit. If they hit in the draft, that's another way to get here on the earlier end of the spectrum. If they get a superstar, just in the draft that just absolutely hits the same way Khan did, because then you're looking at another value deal, and perhaps that makes them go all in a little bit sooner. So they have the value deal, Khan still on his rookie scale, Brandon just started his extension. Like, let's go now. If everything goes right with those guys, I think it could be expedited to 3 years, but I think 4 is probably the most realistic situation. I think they can make the playoffs before, 4 years, though, certainly.
They would
but
have to.
contention, yeah, absolutely. If they don't make the playoffs in that amount of time, we're talking about way further than 4 or 5 years to be a contender. But that's my initial read on the question. I think 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, I don't totally agree. I feel like they I feel like they should be a low-level playoff team in not the upcoming season, but the season after that. You're giving yourself this season to kind of figure stuff out and not put too much pressure on your guys, but still they're gonna again try to push for the play-in for sure. But if you go into the season after that one, so 27, 28, and you haven't gotten much better, the team still is at about the same point that it was at right now, then I would be concerned in my opinion. I think the goal has to be to develop Con and Brandon into your A2 and A3 or A1 and A3 or two A2s, however you want to classify it, but you want to develop those guys into players that can survive in a playoff scenario, ideally, next season. And again, as an eighth seed or as a seventh seed, I'm not talking about them becoming the best team in the East, but I think they need playoff experience pretty quickly. This team is good enough, principally, to make the playoffs as a lower seed. I would say expect them, or this should be the aspiration for them to make the playoffs in the 27-28 season as a lower seed. And then to become like a regular playoff team, I would say 3 years is a fair time to where you feel like they're gonna consistently make the fifth seed maybe or the fourth seed. For them to be a contender, I'd say ideally you're looking at 4 years. You have a lot of the teams in the East that are good right now turning old pretty quickly. The Knicks are not going to be a contender in 4 years' time, unless, of course, I mean, they could be, but not with the personnel they have right now. The Sixers definitely won't be, not with the same personnel they have right now. The Raptors won't be with the same personnel they have right now, if you even want to consider them a contender. The Heat definitely won't be. So you're looking at Giannis Antetokounmpo, Jalen Brunson, Karl Anthony Towns, LeBron James, Joel Embiid, even someone like Paul George,
Yeah.
even probably Jason Tatum. In 4 years' time, all of those guys are not going to be at the top of their game. And so you have to be the next team to fill in that gap, and you have to find the players to help you in that sense. But so my aspiration is get to the playoffs in 27, 28, 3 years until you're a regular, playoff team, and then in 4 years' time, I think they should be at the point where they expect to make the Eastern Conference Finals at least. Contender is always tough because stuff can change, and you have one injury, and things go wrong. But the idea should be to be the team that steps up as soon as the Knicks, the Sixers, the Heat go down. Then you should be the next team in line, I think, to fill that gap.
No, and I think the roster construction represents that timeline ultimately, and like the fact that the Sixers went all in, with LeBron on the verge of retirement, his last season potentially. I mean, he said this is his last decision, but he never said it's his last season officially. We all think it is, assume it is, but Tatum is.
I think he might play 2 years, especially if they don't
Yeah,
win.
I think so too. If they go to the ECF, I think he might just keep pushing to keep, distancing himself and all these records all time. But ultimately, I just think that's what they have to be. A backfill, the Pacers when they flame out, the Sixers, the Knicks when they have to get cap strapped and have to choose between the apron and blowing their team up. Like, you have to backfill in those teams. All right, last question here. Let's get to it from Vonzel Lucky. Not Mr. Lucky 704. This is confused you guys the first time Mr. Lucky left a question, but this is Vonzel Lucky on Twitter. Thank you for the question, buddy. Nice guy, been nice to me. He asked, Tijon, Liam, Hannes for Charlotte need a breakout season. By breakout season, Vonzel says he means like getting to a 79 to 80 rating in 2K, which is an interesting reference point, truly. He says, would love thoughts on likelihood of this for each player based on roster construction and playing time and potential. Hannes, I'll just kind of go rapid fire here and then with a brief thought on each, because I say rapid fire because Tijon is nothing but rapid fire. There is like, if you need to go put a lottery ticket on something, if you think on Tijon winning most improved player, if you think he can get to an 80 overall in 2K this year, if he gets that far, he's in most improved player conversations, truly. So I think there is a very low likelihood that he gets to that level of player, because that means he's an incredibly solid rotation player, and Tijon is not close to resembling that right now, at least from what we've seen. Liam, I think this is quite possible, maybe not this year, but I think he could play well enough to, like, looking at the beginning of next year, being a rotation player that hits a lot of threes, doesn't turn the ball over as much, a little bit more comfortable putting the ball on the floor and attacking the rim like we saw in the summer league. Don't think it happens this year for Liam, because I don't know that the playing time will be there. He'll get some reps. Don't get him mistaken. Don't think we're going to see him down in the G League. Really, probably not at all this year, in my opinion. He's going to be with the senior
I think
roster.
at some point maybe, but not that much. Yeah.
But that's if he plays bad, I think. If he's playing really good, I think they're going to try and make sure he's a part of the rotation for the rest of the season, which is why I say next season I think Liam could be this person that you're talking about. But I don't think this season. I'd say like on a scale of 1 to 10, probably a 5 chance that happens this year. That means he plays incredible and makes himself a staple this year. I think he plays well enough this year to make himself a rotation staple next year to become this player. And then for Hannes, I think probably is possible this year, because it's just, mystery box. We don't know. The rim finishing is good. That really boosts up your rating in 2K for sure when you got really high attributes around the rim, certainly. 3-point shot's not low, so it's not keeping his average down on his overall rating. It's not like a 40. Having that up definitely helps your 2K.
It might be a 40 if they don't let him shoot it. It's possible.
All he has to do is make another one, and it goes right up to like 60, and that really bolsters his case. And then he's a good free throw shooter, got great form, all the things. The biggest X factor for Hannes to become like this kind of player this year is the passing. If it translates like we think it will, most people thought he wasn't going to be a good passer in the NBA. I didn't think he was going to be as good of a passer as he's projecting to be based on a sub-league performance. I'm going to be honest. But he looks a lot better in that area than I think a lot of us thought, and will be a hub for certain units at points this year, whether it's out of slob plays for side out, or it's sob plays for sideline out of bounds, blob plays baseline out of bounds. Like, he is going to be an option there to pass it to and run an action around him for him to find the right guy, because he's capable of doing it. If he really goes crazy around the rim in terms of being incredibly efficient every time he gets the ball, 1-2 dribble, 1-2 step, finish, I mean, it's possible. Hannes definitely has the best possibility to reach, the threshold that you're asking for, Vonzel. The other two, not as much, but Liam, way better chance than Tijon.
Yeah, I want to read out the names. I think this is the official, so hopefully I'm not looking at some projected rating chart, but these are the top 100 rated players in the new NBA 2K game. I want to read out the guys that have an 81 rating. Cason Wallace, Matas Buzelis, Alex Caruso, Dyson Daniels, Ayo Dosunmu, Shaden Sharp, Onyeka Okongwu, Devin Vassell, Tobias Harris, Walker Kessler. So these are some of the guys at 81. And you're talking about 1 or 2 ratings lower. Almost all of these guys are starters. And most of them on playoff teams. So I think it's going to be tough. I agree that probably Harness has the best shot. With Liam, I can see him, being someone that regularly plays end of the bench minutes. But even if he plays well in those, I cannot see that getting you
Coming
up.
to this quite this threshold, certainly. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's why I
that's not
said
the
that.
type of. I mean, now we're getting into how players are rated on NBA 2K, but I don't think that being an efficient 6 points a game, 40% from three type of guy gets you a 79 or an 80 rating on 2K. And with Harness, I can see it if he plays so well that he forces himself into the starting lineup sometimes. Or let's say Nasreed has to sit out 2 weeks, Musa has to sit out 2 weeks. If he can really build up momentum, which he certainly can, we've seen it in the Summer League, he is super strong, super quick, rebounds the ball so well, has generally a really good understanding of how the offense moves. Is there still stuff to figure out for him, also offensively, but especially defensively, yes, but he is not that far away from being a starting level NBA player, in my opinion. He's not quite there, but it's a jump he can make over the course of the season. So if he ends the season and he's at a 78, maybe 79, I wouldn't be too surprised. If you're looking for a breakout season, it also depends on how you want to define it for those guys you mentioned, right? For Tijan, a breakout season would have to be that he actually plays probably like 20 minutes a night, right? We've seen him play 10 minutes a game or maybe 12. I don't know what exactly he averaged last season, but he's been in the rotation and been a bit less than serviceable. But for him to break out, you'd say he's a sixth pick overall. He has to get out there. He has to hit his shots. He has to look coordinated. For Liam, a breakout year would be making the rotation consistently, just at 12 minutes a night, hitting his shots, giving you a little bit of maybe scoring here or there. And then for Harness, a breakout year can be pretty much anything because we haven't seen him in the NBA yet. A breakout year can be you're being really good off the bench. There are some inconsistencies, but we can count on you as a rookie. But a breakout year can also be you're so good that we have to start you because you are playing at such a high level.
No, I totally agree with you. That's why I think there could genuinely be an argument by the end of the season for Hannes to either start over Moussa Diabate or start alongside Moussa Diabate. Nas complicates that. If Nas wasn't here, I think there's a real chance he starts game one alongside Moussa with Miles traded, but Nas complicates that, and I think Moussa is good enough that Hannes isn't going to take it from him anytime early in the season, but like Hannes does have a crazy amount of potential. Certainly my comp picks didn't quite reflect that, but he does have a ridiculous amount of potential. 3-point shot comes along at all, it really changes that calculus that further. I think he's capable of becoming a starting caliber player by the end of the season, even if he doesn't take Musa's spot. And I think that's why I say like he easily has the best chance to get to this. Different, criteria these players could reach, like you said, but under this specific criteria, yeah, I really like what we had to say about that. Interesting question, Vonzo, man. I appreciate you asking. Like, I haven't played 2K in so long. I don't game. I waste too much time on it. Not that there's anything wrong with it. Play your games. All my friends do without me. But it's just I got 2 kids. Very addictive personality. I'll get stuck on it so fast. So I just choose to be addicted to the Charlotte Hornets instead. You know what I mean? Instead of video games. But
I do play 2K from time to time, 2K25. So if you wanna get on there with me, just leave a comment.
That's what, man. That's what makes me want to get it so bad. I miss playing. I love sports games, man. I love playing 2K. I'd hop in my GM, and just like play the offline modes for forever. I did that all the time as a kid. Me and my buddy Cooper back in the day we on the 360 back before the Xbox One came out. They had this mode on the old gen 2K14, 15. It was called All-Star Team Up. And you could go pick an all-star from, you'd be selected into a conference, you pick your position, and you select an all-star in any one of the teams, and you have to play with their backup too. And we would play with with Magic Johnson and Sean Kemp, and just like demolish people. Like I'd finish games with like 32 assists and he'd have dunked the ball 32 times. I mean, it was just, man, I miss the old 2K so much. When they really like neutered my GM mode in terms of what you could do and, you know, customization and just rinse and repeat every year. Same with FIFA. Like that's what makes me mad about the sports games. They
Yes.
only work on the modes that I don't want to pay for because I don't want to pay for them.
But that's why I said I
my
played
video games rant.
2K25 because I'm not.
I don't blame you.
I didn't buy 26. I'm not gonna buy 27. I buy. Same with FIFA. You know, I buy every.
When it goes on sale.
I buy every 5 years, maybe every 4 years, and it's it's okay for me.
Thank you guys for listening to Buzz City Breakdown today. Make sure you like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Again, it's free, doesn't cost you anything. Really helps us keep doing this every day. It doesn't put you on a mailing list, nothing. It really, really, really helps support the show, and you guys have been great in that area. Leave your comments for the mailbag next week. You can also find us on Spotify by searching up Buzz City Breakdown. You can give us 5 stars there and listen to the audio-only option there on Spotify, as well as on YouTube under the playlists tab and our at Charlotte Hornets on SI channel. All the episodes are there as well for YouTube Premium users. And you can leave a voicemail anytime at the Buzz City Breakdown line, 704-750-9063. Leave your thoughts, and we'll put them on the show and respond to them. Other than that, guys, we appreciate you listening, and we'll be back tomorrow for our last episode of the week before we see you guys again on Saturday. So tune in tomorrow. We're going to talk about Dennis Schroeder's comments, and then I have a lot of thoughts on a traditional year 5 jump that we've seen a lot of NBA players make in the past, and that I potentially think the Hornets are betting on Brandon Miller to make. And there's a lot to talk about tomorrow. I got a lot of ideas.
Our last episode of the week, apart from the 2 episodes we're gonna do after that this week.
Well, of the weekdays, that's fair.
Okay.
You're right about that. I meant just of the weekdays. Regardless, thank you guys for listening. We'll see y'all tomorrow.
See ya.
Bye, guys.